and welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to walk you through one of the most requested dishes that we've had so far, and that's risotto. This is the start of what you're going to need to gather for risotto. So first, a cup of arborio rice. You do need to use arborio rice. It can't be any other. The arborio has a nice starch content, and when it cooks and it rubs together, it's going to give off that nice creaminess that you want in your risotto. As we are making a lemon risotto, obviously you're going to need one lemon. We'll juice that, and we're also going to take the zest off. We're going to put some garlic cloves in the broth that we use, so I'll talk about that in a minute. Those aren't going to go actually into the risotto, they're in the broth. One shallot, we're going to use half of this shallot. We're going to dice it real fine, put that in the risotto. Fresh thyme that I just picked from our garden a moment ago. And then two optional ingredients, your choice whether you use it. This is a half a cup of dry vermouth, and this is 1 cup of dry white wine. If you don't want to use them, you can sub them out. The vermouth we're going to put into the risotto, the rice, as it's at the start of the cooking process. This white wine I'm going to put in with my broth. So the broth I have heating up behind me on the stove. There are 6 cups of broth. I'm going to add this to it as well, so a total of 7 cups. You may need more as you go through this process, but that's how we're going to start. So as I said, we're going to use half of this shallot. I'm going to break it down, cut the end off, slice my other end off, and you'll get into this shallot. Cut this a little bit here. You get into it, you'll see that there are 2 parts to this shallot. We're going to use the smaller of the 2. We don't need this much shallot, so we'll move our shrapnel off to the side and dice this up. Another thing that folks asked me was, some of the tools that I use often, and this is a really handy one. This is a lemon zester, really cheap at Walmart. Culinary stores will have them. You can get them pretty much anywhere, but fantastic little tool to be able to pull off my lemon zest. You can use a paring knife, which is what I used for a long time before I had this. But here, see, we're peeling off that zest. That's going to add a nice lemon flavor, that oil out of that lemon with the zest. We're going to add that at the very end of the risotto. It's going to be fantastic. I'm going to go through with my knife. I'm going to chop this a little bit more fine, and then I'm going to chop that in half, and we'll juice that for the risotto. Alright, let's talk a little bit about the rice that we're using in our risotto. So this is 1 cup of superfine arborio rice. You do need to use arborio rice if you want a proper risotto. You're not going to get the consistency that you want using other types of rice. Arborio is a short grain Italian rice. As it cooks, the grains move together, the starch comes off, creating the creaminess in the risotto that you want. So you don't want to use any other kind of rice. This is what you need. You can find it everywhere, really easy to get, but do not try and substitute or it will not work. Okay, a couple other things just before we get to the stove and to the cooking. When you're doing risotto, you want to work with hot broth. So you want to add hot broth to hot rice as we go through that process. So that's why I have that 6 cups of stock heating up behind me with a cup of wine I just put in. In addition, I put those garlic cloves that you saw in the opening. I crushed them, put 3 garlic cloves in there, and then a handful of that fresh thyme just to add some body to my stock. I am using a light chicken stock today. You could use a veggie stock, you could use a fish stock. I wouldn't use a beef stock with this risotto, but when we do a short rib risotto, I always use a beef stock there. But for this one, this is a chicken stock. So again, always a warm stock into the hot rice. It just helps with the cooking process, and it doesn't, if you continually add, because that's the whole process of making risotto, you're continually adding liquid to the rice. If you added cold liquid, it would slow the process down and cool it down too much, and you're not going to get the product that you want. Okay, I have my hot pot here, ready to go. Beside it is my hot broth. I'm going to add into this hot pot about a tablespoon of olive oil. That's extra virgin olive oil into there. To that, I am going to add my shallots. And immediately I'm going to reduce the heat on this down to low. I don't want crispy shallot, I just want them to sweat off a little bit. So there's my shallot in there. And the key with a risotto too, use a wooden spoon as well. You're always going to be stirring in here. You always want this to stir constantly. So I don't want these to brown at all or turn bitter, so I turn my heat down and I'm going to consistently stir this. You're getting a nice aroma of the shallot off of this. I want those to sweat a little bit. And then the next thing we're going to add in here is our rice. So those have sweat down now for a little bit. I'm happy they've softened up. You can see that they are not browned, which is what I want. So into the shallot, we add our rice. And the key now is to make sure every grain of rice is coated with the oil and the shallot. And we're going to toast that rice a little bit. And once it's toasted for a couple of minutes in here, the next step will be to add that dry vermouth. And then we'll start adding some hot broth. Okay, so that rice is toasted for a few moments in there, coated in oil, picking up those flavors of the shallot. Next step is to add in our dry vermouth, and that, and then stir that around. We're going to let that reduce almost all the way. So I don't want the pan to be quite dry, but I do want that vermouth to almost evaporate all of it. You can see the pan is almost dry, not quite, so it's pretty much evaporated. Now we're going to start adding ladlefuls of hot stock. So usually I do 4 to start. So there you go, there's 4 ladles of broth, and now the stirring begins. Keep stirring until broth cooks through, the rice cooks, and it's going to get lovely. So this is the point where we just need to stir. Okay, so you can see that initial addition of broth has reduced. You can also see in here that the rice is starting to get a little bit more creamy. That starch is coming off of the arborio rice, which is exactly what we want, and it just keeps stirring. And so I'm going to continually add warm stock to my rice as it cooks until it's at a point that it's al dente, so not all the way cooked through, and then we'll finish it off with some lemon zest, lemon juice, and a little bit of butter. Folks, so there's all of my broth in there. The rice is al dente. It's nice, it's creamy. So we're going to finish this for a moment, and then we're going to move on to the scallops, and we're going to let this sit. So to this rice, I'm adding our lemon zest. Next step, to add the juice of 1 lemon. That's the lemon that we used for our zest. Stir that in there. I'm going to put a lid onto this. We're going to let this sit. It's going to get creamier. When we're done with the scallops, I'm going to add a little bit of butter to this. I should say as well, I've added some salt and a little bit of white pepper to this just for taste. And so we're going to lid this, and move on to our scallop. All right, folks, I got a smoking hot pan here filled with hot canola oil. I'm going to put my scallops in here. Key with this step, make sure your scallops are nice and dry. You do not want them to be wet. These are nice and dry, seasoned on one side with salt and pepper. You put these in here, and I'm using canola oil on this one so that it doesn't burn. We're going to add a little bit of butter to the pan when these get nice and seared on one side. So you can see how hot this pan is. This is medium-high heat. And the key here is not to try and move these until they're ready. The scallop will tell you when it's ready to move, when it doesn't stick. When it naturally releases from the pan, that's the time to move them. I'm going to season these guys on this side with a little bit of pepper, a little bit of salt, and they should be just about ready to go. Not quite. So to this pan, I'm going to add a little bit of butter, some garlic, and some thyme. So I've added in there some garlic, some butter, some thyme. I'm going to let that roll around in there. They are basically cooked. Baste them a little bit. So let them get nice and happy in that butter for a few more minutes. And then we'll plate them up. There it is, friends. Scallop and lemon risotto. The finished product, I think, turned out really, really nicely. The risotto is nice and light with lemony. There's a little bit of the butter in there that I added at the very end. I didn't videotape that, but I did tell you I added about a tablespoon of butter at the end, melted it through to give it a nice finish, nice sheen. Lots of flavor coming through from the lemon, and then the scallops are just salt and pepper and cooked perfectly. So really hope you enjoyed joining us for this one. It was a lot of fun to put together. Love to see your versions as you move through this, so happy cooking.